Military aircraft. NATO jets ambush Russia's drones at sunrise. Don't miss what happened next. The Dawn ambush. 15 a.m. Eastern European Time. The first light of dawn gilded the horizon. But what followed was anything but peaceful. Across the fields, the piercing buzz of Russian Shahed drones shattered the silence, heading straight for the NATO border. For Moscow's commanders, the timing seemed perfect. A morning strike meant NATO would be distracted, alarmed, and humiliated. In reality, their surprise attack was flying right into a carefully laid trap. Days earlier, Ukrainian intelligence had cracked the mission code. Flight paths, altitudes, and launch times had all been mapped and fed directly to NATO command. Right now, while the Russian pilots believed themselves to be invisible hunters, NATO pilots circled above like patient hawks. Over Polish airspace, a Polish F-16 call sign Falcon loitered quietly. He wasn't searching for the drones. He already knew exactly where they would appear. On his digital screen, red blips began crawling in from the border. 19 hostile drones arrogantly flying low were violating NATO airspace exactly as predicted. Falcon tightened his grip on the stick. The hunt was about to begin. This was not merely a fight of machines. It was a battle of minds. Russian commanders had assumed electronic jamming and low-cost waves of attacks would overwhelm the West. But Ukrainian planners had turned Moscow's greatest weapon secrecy into their biggest vulnerability. The moment the first drone cast its shadow over the morning fields, its fate was sealed. Now I turn to you, the viewers. Where are you watching from today? If you were in Falcon's cockpit, would you fire immediately or wait for orders? Press on to launch at once or press 2 to hold fire. And don't forget to subscribe to follow the next chapter of this dramatic story, The Invisible Net. As the sun climbed higher, the Russian drones moved with robotic precision, hugging the terrain at barely 150 m above ground. Their tactic was simple. Use the landscape as a cloak, slipping beneath enemy radar. For their operators, it felt like the perfect camouflage. But above them, NATO had already strung an invisible net across the sky. A Dutch F-35, cloaked in silence, drifted unseen along the border. Its radar stayed dark, its presence undetectable. Using only passive sensors, it soaked up faint heat signatures rising from the drones below. Every movement was mapped and relayed instantly to the Polish F-16 seconds westward. The hunters didn't need to search. The prey had been handed to them, target by target. On the ground, Patriot missile batteries sat quiet, plugged into the same flawless stream of data. What Moscow's commanders imagined as chaos was in reality a war ballet perfectly choreographed. NATO wasn't reacting, it was orchestrating. Then came Moscow's ace electronic warfare. From mobile jamming units across the border, a digital storm swept through the spectrum, designed to blind radars and scramble missile locks. On paper, the storm was unstoppable, but Ukrainian signal teams had already cracked the code weeks earlier, predicting the exact frequencies Russia would use. While Russian crews believed they were unleashing a blizzard of interference, NATO jets simply switched bands, sensors sliding effortlessly to another spectrum. The invisible shield collapsed before it ever touched the battlefield. From screens in Minsk, Russian officers smiled at NATO's apparent calm, convinced their swarm was untouchable. In reality, 19 drones were flying blind into the deadliest kill zone Europe had seen in decades, Fortress of Sand. Across the border, Russia's pride still loomed large. The S-400 air defense system, a fortress of steel and electronics worth $500 million. Its radar swept the morning sky with a reach of nearly 250 km on paper. It was the guardian angel of the drone swarm, a shield built to repel NATO's fighter jets. To Moscow's commanders, its presence meant victory was inevitable. But a fortress built on sand collapses in the first tide. Ukrainian signal intelligence units had already infiltrated the system weeks earlier, mapping its every pulse with frightening precision. They knew when the radar would emit, how it filtered targets, and exactly where its blind spots lay. So, while Russian commanders watched their consoles, convinced their jammers had blinded NATO's sensors, the truth was far crueler. Their shield was already deaf, dumb, and blind. High above Poland, Falcon's F-16 held steady on orbit, receiving pinpoint targeting data without emitting a single radar pulse. The Dutch F-35 seconds remained like phantoms in the sky, unseen, untouchable. To Russian pilots, the swarm of drones appeared completely secure. Green indicators glowed across their screens, reassuring them that control was intact. Yet, every glowing reassurance marked a drone drifting deeper into the kill zone. The irony was brutal. Moscow had poured millions into jammers, S-400 radars, and layered electronic defenses, believing they could protect their $300 drones skimming across the border. But the very systems designed to shield them had become useless. By trying to blind NATO, Moscow had blinded itself. At 7:00 a.m., a sunlight spilled over the fields below. The stage was set. The drones pressed deeper into Polish airspace, confident in their phantom cloak. The S-400 operators believed their fortress still held strong. What they couldn't see was the trap tightening above them, fighters and missiles poised to strike. The decisive moment was coming, and Russia's mighty fortress was about to be revealed for what it truly was, a fragile illusion. Fire from the ground, 7 to 12 a.m. The silence broke. From a field outside Lublin, Poland, a Patriot 3 missile roared off its launcher, its solid fuel motor leaving a white streak across the morning sky. At nearly 3,800 battlerippers, it looked more like a lightning bolt than a weapon. Its target, the lead drone of the Russian swarm, still swaggering toward Poland's infrastructure. 17 seconds later, the horizon flared. The Shahed tore apart in midair, spraying twisted metal across the fields. People nearby were jolted into panic as burning fragments rained down from the exploded UAV. It was the first slaughter of the day, but certainly not the last. Inside the Russian command post, officers reacted instantly. The launch revealed one concrete thing: the Patriots' frequency. They seized it and focused all their jamming power into that narrow bank. At the same time, an order went out: scatter the swarm. Almost immediately, the neat, predictable formation dissolved. Some drones dropped low, skimming the treetops. Others veered east, hugging Belarusian airspace. In an instant, chaos swept the battlefield. This was exactly the scenario Moscow's commanders had expected. Draw NATO thin. Force mistakes create gaps, but the trap had not sprung. NATO's strategic map had been drawn with care. While the Patriot fired from the ground, Falcon and the accompanying F-16 pilots adjusted their orbits above and armed their weapons. The Dutch F-35 seconds remained dark and deadly. Their sensors continued to feed flawless tracking data. What the Russian commanders mistook for an opening was actually a tightening noose. The drone's dispersal did not save them. It only exposed each UAV to being picked off. A second Patriot screamed into the sky. An undeniable truth emerged. This was no longer a mere drone incursion. It was the start of an extermination. Ukraine's trump card in the sky. As Russia's drones scattered in desperation, NATO's radar picture flickered with uncertainty. Low-altitude maneuvers, combined with heavy jamming, threatened to blur the edges of the kill zone. For a fleeting moment, it looked as if Moscow's gamble might work. But Ukraine had prepared a trump card the Kremlin never saw coming. Hovering high above, just inside Polish airspace, a Ukrainian R-18 reconnaissance drone silently observed the battlefield. It wasn't a fighter jet nor a missile battery. It was an airborne eye armed not with weapons, but with a powerful thermal camera linked through satellite. While Russia's jammers threw up walls of static, the R-18 simply looked down, painting the scattered swarm with blazing signatures of heat. Suddenly, the chaos vanished. Every Shahed drone stood out on NATO's screens like glowing dots, each movement tracked in real time. Even the UAVs that had darted toward Belarusian airspace were lit up, their thermal trails impossible to hide from the R-18's lens. The so-called digital barrier Moscow had erected was nothing more than an illusion. The data streamed directly from the Ukrainian drone into NATO's command network and from there straight into the cockpits of the Polish F-16 Falcons and the Dutch F-35 seconds circling above. The dispersed swarm Russia hoped would confuse its enemies was now fully exposed. Every path, every twitch of movement was laid bare to the hunters in the sky. Confidence surged in the pilots. Falcon gripped his stick tighter, his display now crisp with perfect targeting markers. Each red symbol wasn't just a threat. It was prey-tagged and ready to be destroyed. On the ground, another Patriot missile ignited, roaring into the sky. Overhead, an F-35 pilot armed his first AMRAAM. The battlefield shifted once again, but this time entirely against Russia. With Ukraine's secret eye guiding the fight, Moscow's swarm wasn't just being hunted, it was being exterminated, awakening the giant. 7:28 a.m. The battlefield had tilted decisively against Moscow. Yet NATO had not unleashed its most decisive weapon. High above the morning clouds, flying at 30,000 FT, a massive Spanish E-3 AWACS early warning aircraft entered the fight. With its distinctive rotating radar dome, this aircraft wasn't here to kill. It was here to expose the enemy. The moment its powerful radar lit up, the effect was immediate. The chaotic battle space suddenly snapped into clarity. Russian jammers flooded the spectrum with electronic noise, but AWACS sliced through it as sunlight cuts through morning fog. Every Shahed drone, whether skimming treetops or drifting toward Belarus, appeared cleanly on NATO's screens. For Falcon and his fellow pilots, the difference was night and day. Their cockpit displays, once cluttered with shifting, unreliable data, now lit up sharp and crisp 19 symbols, each one a marked target. The scattered swarm Moscow hoped would overwhelm NATO was reduced to nothing more than a neat list of kill cues. Inside the men's command center, Russian operators misread everything. Their consoles still glowed green, reporting optimal jamming coverage. Convinced NATO was blind, they congratulated themselves on a successful deception. Yet above them, the AWACS tracked every drone movement with surgical precision. The so-called invisible shield was nothing but an illusion. For NATO, the fight was now procedural. With every target clearly identified, coordination shifted from reactive defense to calculated offense. Pilots received firing orders, missile bays armed, and ground batteries elevated into position. The pilots tightened their grips on the stick, sunlight flashing across their visors. Over the radio, calm voices relayed firing sequences. The giant in the sky had awakened, and with it came an undeniable truth. Russia's morning swarm was doomed before the first missile even left its rail. The massacre begins. 7:36 a.m. The skies over Poland were no longer quiet. With AWACS feeding perfect coordinates, the battlefield had become a firing range. Falcon, leading the F-16 squadron, received the first kill order, a lone drone desperately diving toward a power substation. He locked on, and in a calm, steady voice called out, "Fox 2. An AIM 910 Sidewinder kicked off the rail, streaking toward the Shahed sputtering engine. 3 seconds later, Dawn was ripped apart by fire. 1 down, 18 to go. Elsewhere, the Dutch F-35 seconds executed with chilling precision. Flying invisible in the gloom, one pilot calmly selected 2 targets more than 20 miles away. He squeezed once, twice, 2 AMRAAMs roared free, hunting automatically. By the time the drones erupted into blazing shards, the pilot had already moved on to his next assignment. On the ground, Patriot batteries unleashed their own storms of steel. Missiles leapt skyward, then plunged back down at impossible speed, slamming into drones skimming just above the horizon. The battlefield settled into a deadly rhythm. "Lock, fire, explode!" Inside Minsk, Russian operators stared at their consoles in disbelief. Their system still displayed, jamming successful, yet drone signals flickered, cut, and vanished. Officers barked demands for answers that simply didn't exist. Amid the chaos, NATO pilots spoke with calm professionalism, their tone no different from a live fire exercise rather than a fight for survival. The brutal truth was clear. This wasn't combat. It was a massacre. The drones had no countermeasures, no defenses, no chance. By 7:44 a.m., more than half the swarm was gone, erased from the skies in less than 10 minutes. For Falcon and his squadron, the hunt only grew easier. With every drone destroyed, the net drew tighter. For Russia, the morning promise of victory had curdled into a nightmare taking shape in real time. The Falcon's hunt, 7:52 a.m. The battlefield still smoked and streaked with fire. But now, one pilot stood at the center of the storm, Falcon. His F-16 tore across the morning sky like a predator, hunting the last scattered drones over Polish airspace. For him, the mission had shifted from defense to elimination. Falcon's displays showed one drone breaking off from the swarm heading for a railway line. If it detonated there, hundreds of civilians could be killed. Without hesitation, he prepared to launch. As the distance closed, he locked the target. At 9:10 a.m., his thumb squeezed the trigger. Rockets spat from the fighter and ripped forward. The sky filled with the sound of metal tearing. In an instant, the drone fell apart. Its warhead detonated in a secondary blast that lit the horizon like thunder at dawn. But Falcon didn't stop. Another shade suddenly appeared, diving low and trying to skim complex terrain to avoid detection. It rolled hard, afterburner flaring closing fast. From the AWACS overhead came the command. Priority target Falcon cleaned up. He locked, fired a sidewinder, and seconds later, another fireball bloomed below. In the morning, high above, the F-16 climbed away after the kill, its roar echoing over the ground. To those below, Falcon was more than a pilot. He was a guardian, a shield between homes and the chaos raining down from Moscow. By 800 A.M., only a handful of drones remained, NATO jets masked, but Falcon pushed on, determined to finish the hunt himself. He had become the symbol of the morning battle. Relentless, precise, unstoppable. For Russia, the message was brutal. No drone, no jammer, no fortress could stand against a single pilot who already knew every move. Silence over the fields. 8:07 a.m. The roar of afterburners faded, leaving only trails of smoke drifting in the sky. One Bayonne, Russia's last drones were destroyed, missiles, gun batteries, and sheer precision turned them into charred wreckage. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, the battlefield fell silent. The swarm Moscow had promised would bring terror to NATO had vanished, erased in less than an hour. Across a wheat field in eastern Poland, the first light of morning glinted off twisted fragments scattered across farmland and roads. Villagers, still shaken after watching a missile fired from a fighter jet streak overhead, stood near scorched craters left in the earth. In the distance, columns of smoke rose where drones had crashed, each plume a grim reminder of how close destruction had come. Yet above them, NATO aircraft continued to circle, guardians ensuring no threat remained. For Falcon, the silence was deafening. His F-16 sensors no longer showed red targets, only the calm green icons of Allied forces. Adrenaline still surged through his veins. But the mission was complete. He exhaled deeply, whispered a prayer for those below, and gave silent thanks that the hunt had ended before any drone reached its mark. Inside NATO command, officers reviewed the data. The numbers were staggering. Drones launched, 19 drones destroyed. Not a single one broke through. What Moscow intended as a display of strength had instead become a showcase of weakness, exposed in real time to the entire alliance. Meanwhile, in Moscow, silence carried a different weight. Reports of the failed strike reached the Kremlin before the last plumes of smoke had faded. Billions invested in hybrid warfare jammers, radars, swarms had been undone by intelligence, coordination, and superior aircraft. It was humiliation made plain. As the new day began, rural Poland slowly returned to its rhythm. Birds sang again. Villagers collected debris. Children curiously inspected scorched metal fragments. War had brushed their lives and then moved on. Above, the sky stretched clear and endless, safeguarded by NATO's relentless hunters. For those on the ground, dawn had brought terror, but also proof they were not alone. Lessons of the dawn. By 8:30 a.m., the skies above Poland were clear. The battle that had begun with the angry buzz of Russian drones ended in silence, broken only by the distant echo of NATO jets returning to base. 19 Shahads launched, 19 destroyed. The scoreboard was absolute. Yet the real victory was not in missiles fired or drones shattered. It was in the power of intelligence and coordination. Russia had gambled on its doctrine of hybrid warfare. Cheap drones, deniable strikes, and electronic noise meant to confuse and overwhelm. But Ukraine exposed the fatal flaw. When your enemy already knows your plan, no amount of jamming or deception can save you. A $300 drone may be cheap, but when it flies into a worked grid of F-16 seconds, F-35 seconds, and Patriots armed with perfect intel, it is nothing more than target practice. For NATO, the lesson was equally clear. Technology alone does not win wars. It is the seamless fusion of human skill, shared data, and trust between allies that transforms chaos into order. Falcon's hunt in the morning sky was not the story of one pilot, but of an alliance acting as one mind. For Moscow, the humiliation was devastating. Billions invested in air defenses and electronic warfare were shown to be fragile illusions. Their swarm doctrine was not just defeated, it was dismantled publicly, a message broadcast to the world. And for those who watched the fireballs streak across the dawn horizon, the takeaway was deeply human. Wars may be fought with machines, but it's intelligence, courage, and unity that decide the outcome. If you've followed this story to the end, now it's your turn. What lessons do you think military leaders worldwide should take from this battle? Comment below. Smash that like button. Share this video with a friend.